Welcome to the Property Finance Podcast, and today we're joined by Matt Irvine again. So today we're going to be focusing more on his journey and kind of how he's done in property development so far, as opposed to talking about Optimum Digits, which is his accountancy firm. So Matt, thank you very much for joining us yet again.
Thank you.
Your second turn. So this will be your second ever podcast that you've done. So yeah, we've spoken about, and everyone who's listening to this will have heard you speak about the accountancy side of things and everything else. But just as a bit of a refresher, do you want to kind of just tell us again what Optimum Digits does and kind of how you help property investors and developers, and just give them that refresher?
Yeah, so we are an accounting and tax advisory firm which specialises in property and also construction as well. So we offer services from the standard compliance, so your annual accounts, etc., all the way through to a fully outsourced finance function with FD service as well, which is bespoke to our clients' needs and effectively helps them hit their business goals through forward planning and cash flow forecasting.
Amazing. And if anyone hasn't listened to the previous podcast with Matt, obviously go and give that a listen. Loads and loads of golden nuggets in there. I think I ended up learning a fair bit from that. So yeah, well worth a listen. So just talk us through kind of your journey to here, because obviously you and I have worked together for, it must be 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
And completed a couple of deals in that time. So this is kind of a nice one for me because it's almost a bit of a case study as well as a podcast, which is quite nice. So yeah, just talk us through your journey, sort of how you came to obviously starting Optimum Digits, but also your property investment and development journey as well, because yeah, there's a hell of a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I bought my first property in 2013. Back then I was still in a job, still working. I was in a good job, to be fair. So I was still an accountant and back then. So I originally started my studying back when I left school. So always been an accountant, but sort of wanted something a little bit more. Always wanted to invest in property for a few years, but as a lot of new starters in property, sort of the issues that they have, I had the same issue. It was all around money. Kind of thing, and sort of, back then I believed that you needed big money to get involved in property, and I didn't have that. So it was always something I wanted to do, but I kind of felt like I couldn't back then. But I was leaving a job to go to another job. I'd been talking to people within within my team that I was working with that I wanted to invest in property. Back then as a 23, 24 year old, I kind of was talking to a lot of people, not really thinking anything of it. I wasn't exactly selling myself or anything like that to say that I wanted to kind of get involved in property and I was looking for investment. But that investment actually come through someone I was actually working with. So someone asked me on my leaving do, which is still a business partner to this day, in terms of if I'd joined that property journey. And I said no. And they said, why not? Because of money, et cetera. And he offered to put the funds up to actually get started. And then effectively 2-3 months later, we brought our first 2 up, 2 down refurb. And then that was the start of the journey.
And then in terms of your first development deal, which is when you and I obviously got to know each other for the first time, just talk us through kind of the journey that came about there, because that was with the same business partner.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
2 up, 2 down, wasn't it? So kind of obviously you've started off as your 2 ups, 2 down. Well, let's go back a step. How many of those refurbs did you do before the two of you kind of came to me for development finance? So
that was in 2013. We've done numerous refurbs, but we started small. So that was a 2 up, 2 down light refurb. Then we sort of like stepped up to a more of a larger refurb, done a few of them, then stepped up further to sort of putting extensions on the sides, creating 4-bed properties from 3-bed properties, etc., just to kind of gain that knowledge. But because we was working on site, it was us that was actually doing a lot of the work. I've got family that are all in trades, friends that are all in trades, so very sort of well connected in terms of sort of being able to get the work actually done. And we then obviously was getting funds coming back, but at that time, smaller chunks, we're still making money. But it was taking us longer to do because we were doing the work ourselves, kind of thing. So we decided that we wanted to sort of move into development and effectively kind of start to get off of that off of the tools, as I'd say. We was both still working in a day job, so you know, a lot of hours being put into it, but it was still taking us longer than what we wanted.
Yeah.
So we then moved into a single unit, so started small again. A single unit, I say small, it was a 3,500 square foot bungalow, so it was small in terms of units, but big in terms of build. And we built that out, sold that, and then it was the next deal that we met yourselves in terms of sort of funding, which was a site for 3 units, GDV of 1.8 million, and we needed the funding to be able to build that out. So that's when I met yourself and sort of like you come on board with the funding.
That deal was, from a financing perspective, quite an easy deal.
Yeah.
You and I have spoken numerous times about leading up to the funding wasn't always the easiest deal to get over the line, and we've since bumped into a few people that were involved in that side. But kind of talk us through the negotiation process, because there was, we won't call it underhandedness, but there was some peculiar goings on in the negotiation phase.
More I've learned since, sort of like that deal. I didn't quite understand the full, understand exactly what was going on at that point. So we was just finishing our single unit site, and I say just finished, was probably 6 months into a 9-month build.
Yeah.
So then obviously we needed to finish it, but then it then needed to be sold. All the funds that we had on hand was effectively being used in that site, in that single unit site, because we didn't have any level of development funding on that particular unit. So we was approached by the agent who we had a good relationship with. We'd sold a few houses through them, brought a few from them as well, and about this site that was coming up. It didn't have planning. It was just a single unit, so it's just a bungalow at the front of the site with a very large back garden. And we was asked if we wanted to effectively offer and sort of put something together for the owner in terms of what we was looking at. So now I know that there was someone else involved at the same time, and the agent was sort of very much playing us off between one another. I know who that person is as well, which obviously the agent wouldn't have known anyway. But in terms of, there was a bit of underhandedness there in terms of what was actually kind of happening. But effectively, we put me and business partner Sean, as I said, he's a brilliant lad kind of thing, still in business with him now. And sort of like, you know, looking to kind of still do things sort of going forward with him as well. But in terms of what we've done, we put a plan together in terms of what we was looking to get on that site. Originally, we wanted to try to get 4 units on there. And we effectively, back then, we got a big sheet of paper in terms of what the site, the plan was for the location plan. And we drew what we wanted on it, kind of thing, one night. We literally had one evening to kind of prepare this and understand what we wanted to do. And we then presented it to the owner.
And just to put the context on that, the reason you had the one day to put that together was obviously this agent, I think, had put you under quite a lot of pressure to present this offer
absolutely
immediately. And I think that's a key bit of context to put there, that you literally will put under so much pressure to create this plan to then go and knock on the door and kind of present. And
exactly, yeah, and that was it. So we literally had to arrange that. A meeting was arranged for us, and we had 24 hours effectively to kind of put a plan together. And so, you know, no time to speak to architects, no time to really sort of think in terms of with other professionals, which is the process we'd normally sort of take. So me and Sean sort of sat down. It was round his, I think it was at the time, and literally drew what we wanted on that plan, and then presented that to the owner the next day. But as I mentioned before, you know, we didn't have the actual cash available back then, and still, you know, we're still a little bit thinking around. We couldn't raise that money. Like that was our mindsets back then. You know, can't raise any extra money. So what else can we do? So the plan was to offer 120,000. At the time, it was £115,000 per plot.
Yeah.
On the basis of aiming to get 4. But what we'd do is we would pay 150,000 up front, and then we'd pay the balance split evenly on the sale of each unit. So that was the original kind of plan, which was accepted. But what we didn't realise back then was that was all around development funding and what a lender would want in terms of charges, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually give the owner the first charge on that property, which, as we know now, was never, ever going to work well anyway. So we then went probably through a long legal process in terms of sort of getting that over the line. So that was more from our side of our solicitors at that particular time. We changed solicitors probably about 9 months into the process. And we then finally sort of got it over the line for that particular deal. And we then paid the £150,000 over and then looked for development finance at that point. And that's where the problems then occurred, that we then needed to pay the landowner off earlier, kind of so that the lender could get the first charge. And we was away on site after all that happened.
Fun old journey, that one. So in terms of that was obviously your first foray into larger developments, and just talk us through some of the, because obviously I know it came at a difficult time selling wise and everything else. So just talk us through in terms of the deal, kind of some of the challenges that you had with that deal and some of the, because obviously it's been quite a time between that development and actually you've just completed on your next development. So I think it's been 3 or 4 years probably between the two, if not slightly longer. So obviously you've done some other stuff in between we'll talk about, but obviously that deal, I think although it went very well, probably caused you to have that time off to maybe reflect. So talk us through some of the challenges that came out of that and the reason for the break-in time.
So the challenges on the site was more around probably around the main contractor for a start, kind of thing. So we had a main contractor that kind of came in. This was the first time we'd used a main contractor rather than subcontractors, and it was a little bit different compared to what we was used to. We've gone from being on site daily to being on site sort of probably once a week, effectively. And sort of having them site meetings. Sean was on site more, just kind of like because of the sort of some of the challenges that we was having throughout the build and some of the changes that we sort of had throughout the build. So although it was a fixed price, us being us at the time wanted to kind of change and improve certain parts of it. So there was variations to that contract. But at the end of the day, it was about creating the properties that we wanted to create. So I don't regret doing them variations. They was certainly needed, and to be able to sort of build to the level of quality that we wanted to build to. We had some challenges around sort of the build, mainly around the bathroom side of stuff, where things weren't quite done right.
Didn't you have an issue with the stacks or something, didn't you?
Yeah, so it was
imagine that or not.
So it was all around the toilet frames that was put in. So we always like to put our bathrooms and our kitchens to a high standard. Coming from a family who owns a bathroom retailer, I have quite a high expectation in terms of what the bathrooms are going to look at.
Bathroom looks like,
exactly. So we always fully tile our bathrooms, and we always do sort of like wall hung toilets, etc., and sort of hide all of the pipes, the stacks, etc., etc. We always make sure that everything's hidden, and effectively what had happened was when they'd put the toilet frames in wrong.
Right.
And when they then fully tiled everything, when I walked in and I said, well, that toilet's a little bit high, kind of thing. Sort of looked at it, and what they hadn't done was they hadn't set the height of the actual pan on the frame, and it was now fully tiled. So that they then tried to corrected it wrong, and then we ended up having to rip out the whole frame at a later date to actually put it in properly, which me and Sean managed as part of that process.
Was that just on one of the houses on
all three? All three,
wow.
all three houses, all bathrooms within every single house.
And who ended up covering the cost of you having to do those?
It was all covered in the retention.
Right.
So as part of the JCT, we had a retention, which is 5%, which we held back as a result of it.
Amazing. So when it came to the sales of those 3 properties, what were your expectations versus what actually happened?
So we put a spade in the ground during COVID. So we actually started kind of throughout COVID, which kind of like put a little bit of doubt in our mind as to whereabouts we thought the market was going to go, etc.
Well, I think we only just managed to get if I remember correctly, we just managed to get the finance through. Was it either the January or the February? I think I can't remember off the top of my head, but we were literally just in time for when lenders started pulling deals. So we were. Yeah,
it was a questionable time back then in terms of what was going on. But we, in terms of sort of like whereabouts what we was expecting. So we had a GDV in our mind of 1.83, I think it was off the top of my head.
I think that sounds about right. Yeah,
and we achieved 1.793.
So not a million miles away at all.
No, kind of thing. It was whereabouts we was expecting. We had I think it was a 15-month facility, I think it was.
I think so, yeah. I think they pushed it to 15 months. And to be fair, we were with a very flexible lender as well, which I think is probably a good thing to
Great lender,
mention.
yeah, absolutely. Brilliant lender in terms of no problems with them whatsoever. They was good in terms of sort of like with the drawdowns, with the when they were sending the QS out, QS was brilliant as well. No complaints whatsoever from that particular lender. But I think the key thing was, we went through COVID and we didn't have to refinance at the end of it. And that was the
we looked at it a few times. I remember we were sitting there with dev exits lined up going, are we going to have to, are we going to not? So I can imagine that was stressful.
It was, but I had full confidence in what we created as well. They was high quality houses. They was, in terms of whereabouts they were, in terms of value wise, they was at the top,
absolutely,
for the street, and it was on a great street as well. So I feel like we delivered a really good product.
Then it sells, you're done, you're out.
Yeah.
Then you take an almighty pivot, which is for a few years. So this is kind of, I think, actually one of your, for the first couple of years, probably an incredible business, but it kind of, whether you want to talk about the ending bit or not, I think it'd be helpful too, but it was a bit of a roller coaster journey, but a hell of a pivot.
Yeah.
So just talk us through, you've done a development and then you decide to go into
service accommodation. So the actual,
not only service accommodation, you went into rent-to-rent service accommodation.
I know.
Which was a big, a lot of people would look at that and think, well, what would make you go from that to that?
So back then I was still doing these developments, and obviously developments are chunky cash. You get chunky cash coming in, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that, but you
struggle for the month.
Monthly, it gives you them spikes in terms of cash coming in. I'm, as an accountant, I like to know what's coming in on a monthly basis, making sure that I'm not overspending, et cetera, et cetera. And that's very, very difficult to do from when you've just got big chunks of cash coming in at any given point. And so I like to have that monthly cash flow coming in. So I was still working throughout all of this. I was still sort of working in big businesses, running finance functions, et cetera, et cetera. But what I was doing back then was actually consulting. So I'd moved out of being a full-time employee on the books effectively through to just being a consultant and kind of going in to do specific projects, whether that be process improvements, improving the systems within them particular businesses, working in the UK, working overseas, etc. So I was still doing all of this stuff as part of the process, which I wanted to kind of, at the time I felt like I wanted to, in my head it was like, I just want to be in property, be in property. Whereas what I realise now is it wasn't a case of wanting to just be in property. I wanted that. I wanted to work for myself. That's what I was actually wanting. So I decided to look at that point, wanting to always be in property. I decided what is the most cash flowing business in property, and that's why I went into service accommodation effectively. So I went on a training course for a couple of days, which it wasn't one of these big training courses where you're in a room of 50, 60, 70 people, weren't nothing like that. It was a training course which was around someone's house. There was meant to be a maximum of 10 people in that house. There was only 3 of us, to be fair. So it was very sort of close-knit in terms of sort of being able to ask the questions that you wanted to ask. And that's whereabouts I then met the business partner for the service accommodation business. And we looked at my area, we looked at his area, Peterborough compared to North London for service accommodation. What's going to be better?
Yeah.
So we decided to launch the business in North London in August 2019, it was.
6 months later, the country comes to a standstill.
6 months later, the country comes to a standstill and all bookings are cancelled, and we're then in a whole world of pain trying to figure out how the rent's going to get paid, which, yeah.
How many units did you have at that point then?
2.
So you had 2 units that you had taken on rent-to-rents for presumably 5 years, or did you actually...
3-year contracts.
So you've gone for 3-year contracts. So you sat with those, they've been running for 6 months, presumably by that point. What do you do at the moment that Boris decides to lock down the country?
First thing I'd done was look at my phone and see all the cancellations come through. But we went from being fully booked to completely empty within like the space of an hour, I think it was, something like that. It was crazy. But
and how long did that whole last? I mean, realistically, so let's say all your bookings were cancelled from the end of March. When did you start getting people
straight away
kind of coming back?
Yes, straight away from, but you had to pivot. It's as simple as that back then. Kind of thing like, we obviously couldn't accommodate for tourism, but
so you started
what
to accommodate
could we accommodate for? And the answer to that was contractors.
Yeah.
So we decided, so that's when we then started to sort of build a sort of more of a direct booking part of it. So when people booked through booking.com or something like that, we'd then communicate with them, talk to them and say, well, look, we can offer you a better deal. Back then it was just more about making sure our overheads was covered.
Yeah.
So that's how we sort of continued within that business. But as the business, as COVID sort of progressed, we grew. We went from 2 units to around about 10.
And is that where it peaked out?
No, we went ended up at 18 units.
Wow, okay. That's a hell of a growth period to go through. And you're happy going through kind of the numbers of it and So in terms of the 18 units then, so obviously the developments made you probably circa a few $100,000 in chunky lumps, but what's that portfolio representing to you as kind of obviously don't give us a specific number, but as a monthly, it's creating something where I'm guessing work wasn't really an issue anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that business, I completely sort of I left the place that I was working at the time. Yeah. As a consultant, I sort of didn't look for my next contract or anything like that. And effectively, I was in a place of whereabouts the business was very, very systemized. You'll hear that service accommodation is passive. It's certainly not a passive business whatsoever. So even though
I don't think there's any such thing as a passive business these days.
It's not. So although it was very systemized and that side of stuff, I was still involved in the business, but just not on a day-to-day basis kind of thing. So,
and in terms of finding those units, how did you go about that? Was it just connecting with letting agents, or was it so you'd actually managed to go into agent? Because a lot of people come and they say, oh well, I want to get into rent deals kind of thing, but agents turn me down or won't do anything. So did you find with North London they were a bit more understanding of it?
I wouldn't say understanding. I'd say they certainly needed to take some convincing. To be fair, in terms of actually the sourcing part of it, that was very much done by my business partner. So that was his sort of role within the business, to kind of like find the apartments, convince the landlords effectively to kind of be happy to sort of do Airbnb, Booking.com, etc., and run them as service accommodation units.
Okay, so that business lasted, you stepped away from it after sort of 3.5 years?
I officially stepped away from it November 2023, so November last year.
Okay, so pretty much did just over 4 years then.
Yeah.
So not a bad amount of time to be in. And what kind of, again, I'm touching on interesting bits here, but in terms of stepping away, what were the reasons behind kind of wanting to step away from that? And obviously you've just taken on a new development deal, so obviously that factors in part of it. But what kind of caused that stepping away?
So it was more me looking at what I wanted to do, really, more than anything. So, as you said at the start, I've gone from being a developer through to sort of building a service to accommodation business, which is rent to rent. The business, is earning some good money.
Yeah,
but
it's not an asset.
It's not an asset in terms of, you're building the business, which is an asset, don't get me wrong, but that's limited to a degree.
Yeah. It's limited to the lease length, isn't it?
Exactly.
At the end of the day, if those leases disappear, what are you actually left with?
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it becomes a problem, I think.
Exactly. So certainly a lot of sort of looking at what I wanted to achieve. And that was very much, I joined a business mentorship at the beginning of 2023. Which was all around property, which was with Andy Hubbard.
Yeah.
It was on his mentorship. And part of that is looking at whereabouts you want to be in 12 months, 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
And kind of putting that plan together. And I questioned myself as to what I actually really wanted to achieve within property. And, a rent-to-rent portfolio for service accommodation wasn't it, effectively. No. And we, me and my business partner within that business sort of didn't really want to take the business in the same direction.
Yeah.
And we certainly didn't sort of have the same values either, kind of thing, in terms of whereabouts things were and whereabouts things was going to go. So it was just the right decision to step away at that point.
Off the back of that, you then partner up with 3 new business partners to then move into your newest venture. So I think I'm right in saying that connection kind of came off the back of obviously joining this business mentorship, or property mentorship, whatever we want to call it. But obviously the 4 of you are part of that same group, and off the back of that, you've now invested in some barns in Devon, which at the point of recording have just started being demolished and smashed about. So talk us through that process then, because obviously you are quite some distance away from the property.
Yeah.
So you've gone from developing and investing in your area to doing SA in North London to now developing farms in Devon. So you kind of moved all around the country a bit, really. So how does that work? Because it must be, obviously you've got the benefit of building the accountancy now at the same time, which kind of takes a lot of your time, I would imagine. But how are you kind of coping with that? How did you come about finding it? And what's the story behind that one? Obviously, we were very privileged to do the finance on that one as well, so I kind of know the financial side of it. But how's that all come about?
So it came from of the 3 people, one of the 3 was on the same mentorship as me last year.
Yeah.
And because of the accounting business that I'm now doing, that sort of led me onto one of the other partners as well. Yeah. So originally, them 2 partnered up to do the site, and they originally had another site on that was a much bigger site that they had, which was it was high GDV in excess of like 5-6 million quid. I say it was a big
site. Old site, yeah.
Which they approached me about originally in terms of sort of looking at, obviously being a developer already, in terms of sort of helping with lending, et cetera, sort of thing. So that site ended up falling through, but they had this other one that they was also looking at doing that they already had agreed, and they effectively approached me to sort of be involved within that deal. Obviously, from my side, it's all around the accounting side of stuff and making sure that everything's structured correctly, making sure that we're sort of on budget. So they that business obviously sits within that top package effectively. So we've got all the processes and systems in place to be able to obviously look at that anyway. So my main priority is obviously my accounting and tax advisory practice, but with the support that they needed and wanting to bring me on board, effectively nicely sat in that sort of top package that we offer.
And in terms of obviously there's a big distance between all of you. There are 4 people, kind of 4 opinions, if you like, on this one site, which I've had some, as I've spoken about in previous episodes, some horrendous JVs. And whilst I'm not suggesting that this is a bad JV at all, but having been there myself in bad JVs, how are you managing that situation to make sure that this remains a solid team? Because there's 4 of you involved in something. It's inevitably at some point someone is going to have a different opinion to everyone else.
Absolutely, kind of thing. And for me, it's about who you're working with, kind of thing. So all 4 of us are very sort of open to other suggestions. All 4 of us are open to listening to other people and other people's thoughts, and effectively sort of putting a plan together to get us to whereabouts we want to be, and sort of look what is that best option going forward. What I suggest, someone else might suggest something better, or what they suggest, I might suggest something better. We're all open to that. Yeah. So it's not a case of managing it. It's just more who we are as people and what we like. I think that's more important, and that's what I certainly now look for in a JV.
And because one of the big things for me is when we were creating the JV partnerships that I've been in, we never had clear expectations. There was always very much a just do it and see what happens kind of thing. And part of that came from, at the time I was early 20s and they were in their late 40s, late 30s. So it's very difficult to set the same expectations. But when you've kind of come into this one, obviously you've had your JV with Sean, which has gone really, really well. You've had your second JV, which has gone well, but maybe towards the end has kind of hit that point where you both knew it probably wasn't the right thing. It hasn't turned nasty, but you've had that opportunity to kind of step away where it does. As you move into your third JV with significantly more people, kind of what expectations are you setting within the team? Because I'm just thinking people who are listening and watching this, probably thinking about going into JVs and everything else. What expectations do they need to set within the team to make sure that things don't get to a stupid point?
Boundaries kind of thing. That's what it kind of comes down to. Like, what is each person responsible for? Yeah. So, from my perspective in this JV, it's all around the accounting and the finance.
It's very clear where your bit sits. Yeah.
You've got Liam and Tom in terms of their sort of on-site. They're actually physically constructing the barns and sort of actually making sure that we're sticking to budget. And then Froze is all around sort of the marketing side and sort of helping the actual site sort of move forward as well. Yeah. So, we all have our individual parts of the business in terms of what we need to do and what we need to achieve. So setting them boundaries is kind of like it's sort of black and white in terms of what's what, and sort of how I kind of feel with sort of certain JVs is if you don't have them boundaries, you kind of start stepping on people's toes, and if you're starting to step on people's toes and starting to interfere, people are going to start to not going to start to get annoyed, thinking that someone's stepping on their toes, etc., etc. So it's just about outlining them roles and responsibilities from sort of day one.
And there's a very clear way of outlining those. And I guess this is where the question to you is, have you sat down and done a shareholders agreement? Does that shareholders agreement detail out roles, responsibilities, everything else? Or is it not quite as detailed as that? Kind of where have you sat with, in terms of making it black and white, how black and white is it?
Yeah, so in terms of our roles, it's very clear because of what we do day to day. Yeah, kind of thing. So, Tom and Liam's, they have construction companies.
Yeah, they're never going to touch the accountancy
side.
So,
like, it's just how it kind of is. Obviously, I've got the accounting side of stuff as well. So, it's in terms of shareholders agreement. Yeah, we have a shareholders agreement in place because that's one thing that all of us wanted. We've all been. We've all had issues with other business partners in the past. Yeah.
Well, and mine came from not having a shareholders agreement as well.
Exactly. Because what do you do? Something goes, you don't agree on something.
That's it. You literally hit a point of where can you go? And also, I find with the financial side of things as well, there comes a point where there's money left in the bank account or whatever. How do you then divvy that up? How's that decided? And without shareholders agreement, it really does seem to be just finger in the wind. What do we do with it? And
all that's covered, kind of thing. All of that's covered in the shareholders agreement in terms of what's paid out, in terms of dividends, et cetera, how it's paid out. So that's massively important, because no one enters into a business for a fallout to happen.
No,
but the fact is, you never know what's going to happen, and it's about having that fallback to make sure that if something does happen, that you've got that fallback to refer back to what you originally agreed when you entered into the deal.
And in terms of this site, obviously at the point of recording, it's kind of only just commenced, really. But have you found any challenges or any issues as of yet with kind of obviously I know the deal is a 2-phase deal. Obviously you've put planning in for some further development of the site, some extensions to the units, and obviously that is going to create a point where either it's going to be an issue or actually it will sail through and be wonderful. But is there kind of anything that you're looking at as a team? This isn't kind of you individually sort of picking fault and everyone else, but as a team, have you sort of found any issues with sort of the first couple of weeks?
To be honest with you, right now we're actually on target to whereabouts we was expecting to be. So in terms of the build phase, there's certain things of whereabouts we've not been able to do, but we've pulled other things forward. So at the moment, everything's going to plan. But as with developments, there's bound to be something that sort of crops up. And that's when we'll sort of meet up and sort of talk about that particular challenge as a team. So, but we're only sort of a few weeks into it, and we're sort of in that sort of site clearance sort of stage. So, right now there's minimal stuff that can sort of go wrong as long as stuff's sort of happening. So nothing at the moment, but deals will be deals. We'll see, won't we?
In terms of property education then, so I want to touch on this briefly, because actually you've come to property education later than most people.
Yeah.
Most people would come to property education before they got started, whereas actually you've come to property education having already done a handful of refurbs, having already run a successful SA business, having already done a couple of developments. So I've obviously built the bungalow and then the 3 units. So you're already quite a way ahead of where everyone else is that normally goes into property education. So how have you found that? Have you found actually it's been quite tricky, or what are your, I guess the big question is, what are your thoughts around property education? Because it's quite a catalytic subject, it feels sometimes.
I think, so I did do a couple of courses throughout that period before I sort of joined in 2023. So I sort of understood what happened and what sort of level of information you got on a sort of training course. Now, so yes, I started investing in 2013, but I think the first course I'd done was probably around 2018, I think, somewhere around there anyway. And it was a deal sourcing course, to be fair.
Right.
Because again, as I mentioned before, I was chasing that, I want to get some income.
Chasing
I want to get some income
deal,
kind of thing. So, and I kind of I think it was a 2-day course, I think it was something like that. I can't remember how much it were now, probably a couple of grand or $3,000, whatever it was. And I realised that when I come away from that, there was such a, yes, I got a lot of the basic knowledge, but there was such a lack of what next step I needed to really do.
Yeah.
And
you almost feel as if you've got to pay for that monthly
yes,
to actually get any kind of valuable information, which is what I think I've found with a lot of property education is they dangle the carrot of, here, have a 2-day, but actually what we're going to do is spend 2 days giving you all the information that you could have found on Google.
Yeah, exactly.
If you actually want some information, then you need to come and jump onto this next stage, which I always find very peculiar, because I think actually the 2 days should be there for, here's all the information. The monthlies shouldn't be for information. It should be for support, networking, etc. And that's what I always find very odd.
Yeah. But I do think it depends on who you go to as well. So
absolutely. Not every 2-day course is the same by any stretch of the imagination.
And I think that with that deal sourcing course that I went on, like I then went and done a mentorship, not particularly with them, but a mentorship after that, which I didn't really get much value from, if I'm honest. From a deal sourcing perspective, I didn't really. And yeah, I very quickly realised that I was going down the wrong route and didn't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Which then led me, silver penny syndrome, as they say. That's when I then sort of went on to service accommodation as well and everything else. So, but what I felt like I needed in 2023 was, I made that decision at that point that I wanted that support in terms of whereabouts I was sort of going. I didn't need the knowledge as such.
Yeah.
I wanted that support. And
was it support or was it accountability? Or
bit of
both,
both,
I guess.
Bit of both kind of thing. So I wanted to sort of bring my wife into the business. Me and my wife have two very, very different mindsets, certainly back then. And
when you say different mindsets, how do you mean?
So I'm very much about growth, pushing, sort of like.
Is she quite reserved? Is she?
She's reserved, very
safe.
Safe,
right,
absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm sort of like the risk taker.
Yep.
Constantly pushing, which is sort of like got all the different sort of businesses as to whereabouts it's at. But she's sort of very much, Matt, you need to think about that. Trying to sort of like.
I live in exactly the same house.
Exactly, kind of.
I have exactly the same thing where I'm very much the risk taker. The money doesn't necessarily come in every single month at exactly the same time, whereas she's very, I need to have this money in at this point, exactly first of every month. It needs to be the exact same amount every single month. And it's that regimented mindset of, as long as I know this is coming in on the first of every month, everything's sorted.
Yeah.
And I very much understand
exactly. So it's
that mindset.
So I wanted to kind of, like, I'd been doing all this stuff in property, but my wife was never sort of involved. She knew what was going on and everything else, and she's just sort of left me to it. Signing up to £1 million personal guarantees and everything else and whatever. She was.
For someone who's very safe, that's a very risky move to make.
Kind of thing. But obviously she has the belief in me in terms of that. But to her, she's The money's not made until it's in the bank account, which is very, very true.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. But kind of like as I'm sure with people that sort of start in property, when I first kind of started, there was little bits coming in, little bits, and then obviously as the deals got bigger, more cash kind of was being earned through it. So she was very much kind of like. Could see the amount of work that was going into it, how much I was out of the house, how much I was working, etc. And she questioned a lot whether it was worth it. Like,
I've had the exact same conversations there as well. Yeah, 18-hour days, and then you're sitting there going, "I haven't brought in as much this month." Exactly. It's that awkward conversation of, well, you're out 18 hours a day or whatever. I mean, there's sometimes where you'll know as well. You leave on a Monday morning and you don't reappear until a Thursday morning, and then the money in the bank at the end of the month isn't what you thought it was going to be, or whatever, something gets delayed. And I've very much had those same conversations.
Exactly, kind of thing. So I wanted to bring her into it. So part of that mentorship with Andy Hubbard was to bring my wife into it, look at what we wanted to achieve as a family. So not just what I wanted to achieve, because she just left, because my wife just left me to it. It was very much, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve for the family? It was. And it was all whereabouts I wanted to take the family. And because my wife was very much kind of like happy with whereabouts we was kind of going. But sort of like bringing her into that and sort of sitting down and actually looking at what we wanted to achieve together.
And how did you approach that conversation? Because it's quite a difficult thing to approach. Because I keep saying I've had the same thing, but I have that same conversation of, all of a sudden going to your wife, your partner, whatever, who's been in full-time work, who doesn't want to deviate from the plan, and all of a sudden going, well, why don't you leave all that and take that risk and jump here? And I know how I approached that conversation. So it'd be interesting to know how someone else approached it.
How do I approach it? I think I was actually away for New Year because I've known Andy for a few years, sort of followed him, etc., kind of thing with things. But I see that he had the the sort of mentorship, etc. And I think I just sat down with her and was just like, right, I want us to look at whereabouts we want to go together. I want to do this mentorship. I want to sort of push because at that point it was just all about the development side of stuff, and obviously our DSA business then as well. So, but I wanted to bring her in. I mentioned that to her. I said, but also I want to be able to bounce off of someone who's already done it. Who's already so far ahead of us. Right now, I can't do that. And she, again, she sort of left me to it and allowed me to go away and sort of spend a fair amount of money in terms of sort of mentorship. And probably the first couple of months was, although she was on the calls, there weren't like sort of as much involvement from her, but certainly sort of as the months progressed, she's massively sort of got involved in things, and
she started to become more vocal and more engaged.
Absolutely, kind of thing. And we, in terms of with the accounting practice, she's now left her job. She's now in the accounting practice, and we are now doing everything together as a team, which is what we sort of wanted to achieve in the first place. So, from that mentorship, compared to whereabouts I was when I first started, and compared to whereabouts we are now as a family, it's massively improved. And we've got our goals of whereabouts we want to be in 12 months. We're already hitting some of our goals for 3 years,
which is amazing.
Effectively, we know whereabouts we need to be. We're on another retreat together in January with Andy as well. Of whereabouts we'll re-look at them 5-year goals and sort of revamp them compared to whereabouts we are now. And it's massively sort of progressed us forward. But that's come down to the fact of having that extra level of support. But going back to your original thoughts around sort of training, it's I see the training side of stuff is if you've got a trainer that has the right intentions, and you have a trainee that has that wants to put the effort in and wants to grow and is happy to do that, then it can always be a success. The problems always come when the trainers don't have the right intentions, or the trainee thinks that level of training is just a magic pill to success. And they think the trainee is going to do everything the trainer's going to do everything for them, which is never ever the case. You have to put the effort in. You have to do what they say.
It's an accountability at the end of the day, isn't it? You're not going on to that mentorship take Andy, for example. You're not going on that mentorship expecting Andy to sit and run your accountancy for you.
Of course not.
It's a completely different thing. And I think that's coming back to that point on education. I think it's about finding the right educator, because there are some, to put it bluntly, some shit ones out there.
Well,
some incredibly bad ones who all they want to do is they want to take your money, go and invest in property or go and invest in whatever. Then whether they've taken that as a loan or as payment for the course, whatever, their venture then fails. All of a sudden they disappear off the face of the earth, and you're left holding whatever you're left holding, which most of the times is bugger all.
And that's always how many times have I seen sort of people that are just been on a training course and then 3-6 months later decide to become a trainer?
It's ridiculous. And we've spoken about this on the podcast so many times before. My hatred of people that will go on 2-day, 3-day courses, glean the smallest amount of information they can. Because at the end of the day, they're going on courses where not all the information is available. They're then reselling information that isn't all the information that's available. So you end up with this diluted system where we've ended up with this trainer teaching a 2-day course, not giving all the information. This person who's been on that course then teaching a course where they didn't get all the information, but then they're holding back some information, and everyone down the line is holding back information. And you get to a point where you go, what are you actually selling?
Yeah,
there comes a point where the course is so diluted and so uninformative that you think, what is the point?
Yeah, absolutely kind of thing. And I think that
I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's I think it comes back to being honest and transparent kind of thing. So someone who's gone on a training course, then gone out 3 months, done really, really well at something, it's not that they can't necessarily, in my opinion anyway, not that they can't necessarily show and train people what they've done within them 3 months, but be open and honest about it. Like, it's if someone's open and honest about it and the fee reflects what they're actually training, then there's, it's a win-win. But the problem really comes is when these people say that they are trainers, they've done it for years, they've not really done them deals.
And what can you learn in 3 months? What can you actually learn in 3 months? Because you've been in property for, your first deal was what, 2018, did you say the first one was?
First one I ever done was 2013.
Well, if you go 2013 then, so you've been in property for 11 years.
Yeah, I know.
There's a lot. I mean, even if you just go back to 2018, which was when 2019, the first development deal, even that 4 or 5 years, even that's not quite a full cycle of property. Even that is, what can you learn in 4 or 5 years? And it does baffle me, these trainers who will go out and who will, like you said, will portray that they've been in it for 20, 30 years when no, they haven't. They've been in it for about 3 months. And the bit that gets me the most, and this is, again, turning into a debate about property education, but the one that gets me is the property trainers that earn more from training than they do property.
Yeah.
Because you sit there and you go,
that's why they're doing it.
Well, of course they are. And that's the thing is, it always baffles me. Are you a property trainer or are you a property developer? Because I don't think you can necessarily be both.
Yeah.
Some people can. Some people can have a hand in each side, but don't make out like you're this wonderful property developer if actually what you're doing is one development every 3 or 4 years. Selling a weekend course every single weekend. And there's so many of them out there. But
absolutely, kind of thing. I think that
mad.
Just going back to the whole thing of what can you learn in 3 months, very, very little kind of thing. But someone might be interested in that 3 months, but just be honest about it, be open about it. And,
well, deal sourcing, for example, in 3 months, actually, you probably could learn quite a lot.
Yeah.
Property development, no, not so much. No.
That's what I mean.
That's where the difference could be. When deal sourcing, you might have sourced 3 or 4 deals in that time.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, like you said, about being honest about the expectations and everything else. But
the problem with it is when it comes down to training, sometimes honesty don't sell. And
it doesn't, unfortunately. Never does.
They're the trainers which, like you, I think I have the problem with. It's, in terms of sort of like the people that sort of I would work with now, it's always a case of do your due diligence on people. You know, like so many people will jump into a training course without knowing who their trainer is, without knowing what they've done, what their businesses have been in the past. And, that person needs to do that due diligence. Same wise from a trainer's perspective. I know trainers that will do their due diligence on the trainee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of thing, to make sure that it's the right fit for them. Because ultimately it's all about fit. And as long as you get them to, like the trainer and the trainee, that are the right fit for one another, things should work out. It's when that fit don't quite work, whereabouts the issues start to occur.
Absolutely. Putting education to one side then. So I'll finish on this. What is your plan moving forward then? Just kind of fill us in. Obviously, you've had a very interesting journey.
Yeah.
A few pivots in there. So obviously the accountancy now is up and running, doing very, very, very well. Obviously you've got this development deal that's underway. You've got a few other bits and pieces that you're looking at. So what is the plan for the next couple of years? Is it to just keep growing the accountancy whilst doing a few developments, or is there some grand plan somewhere of something else?
So my main priority is certainly growing the accounting practice.
Yeah.
So there's as you mentioned it's massively sort of growing quickly. We've got offices coming on board. We've got more staff coming on board now.
Does that excite you more than the property development stuff? Or is it in a slightly different way? Because it's interesting. You've been in it for kind of 6 years full time almost, the property development side. What gives you more excitement?
The accounting, to be fair. Yeah, just purely because the value. So one thing I've realised over this in setting the accounting practice up is that I want to keep adding value to people. I want to keep, yes, I've always been a creator as such. I wanted to create the like from a property development side of stuff. That's what excites me, sort of creating that high-end product, which is what I've always done.
Yeah.
So that part excites me there. But certainly from the accounting perspective, it's creating that business which is adding value and making a change to other people and their businesses. So, there's so many people out there of whereabouts, they just don't, they're very, very, very good at what they do.
Yeah.
However, they just don't understand numbers. And, that's, they see cash coming in, they see it going out, they don't know where it's going. They know what that big goal is that they want to hit, but they don't know how to get there.
I feel that pain,
sort of being able to add that value to people and kind of help them create and hit their goals by looking at whereabouts they want to be, re-engineering them sort of targets down to how many customers they need to be talking to, how many quotes they need to be sending out as part of their KPIs, etc. That's adding real value to other people. And,
and you can tell you're so much more passionate about the accountancy stuff. I don't mean that in a bad way. You don't seem unpassionate about the development side of things, but you can see your eyes light up when you talk about the accountancy, the growth of the accountancy, the fact that obviously that's where you've brought your wife in. And I think that's probably where most of that passion comes from, is actually you've brought her into something
absolutely
that's there that can grow together. But you can definitely tell that the accountancy
and when I turn around and say that our success is only measured by our client's success, that is how I run the business. That's because that we're not just a tick box exercise accounting practice. We want to be always adding value to our clients, and
you're not
the more successful they are, the more successful we are. Simple as that.
And it's not just about an end of year tax return for you.
Absolutely
it's
not.
about actually how have you got to that point? What's the journey to that point? And you can definitely feel the passion is there for the accountancy. But sorry, I interrupted around the plan. So what's kind of the plan for the next few years? And is it to keep doing developments on the side?
I'll always do property development. So it's my main day to day will always be the accounting practice, and then I will look to sort of do developments on the side. Obviously, we've got the one at the moment with the barns. I would like to do some more a little bit closer to home.
Yeah, of course.
So certainly some more stuff with Sean, sort of going forward as well. That's sort of whereabouts I sort of want to be. So just
It'd
sort
be
of
nice to bring you
two.
full circle, wouldn't it? It's kind of that nice thing of you've been on that you started your journey with him. It's nice to kind of get that journey back.
Absolutely, absolutely, kind of thing. And like I said, he gave me that opportunity, kind of thing at the start, and that's something I'll never forget at the end of the day.
Well, it's almost now at a point where you can almost give that back to him now, can't you? Because you're at a point now where with the accountancy and everything else, actually you can present an opportunity to him for him to come back in with you, as opposed to you can almost give him that gift back, can't you?
We still if I
know,
approach him
sounds
right
like
now,
you don't talk to him anymore.
we still talk and everything else, certainly, kind of thing. It's more kind of like he's more risk adverse than what I am, effectively, kind of thing. So with obviously what's been going on in the market, etc., that was part of the reason as to why we sort of slowed down afterwards. And my sort of why I kind of pivot in the wrong way, as we know now, with into sort of service to combination. But
I don't know if it's the wrong way, because it allowed you actually to get to the point you are. And I always look at this with my stuff, like where I've pivoted off and done something random. Actually, I then look at it and go, well, actually, that sustained me for 3-4 years. I suppose that's the thing.
100% kind of thing. And I completely 100% agree with that. But the way I'm always long term, I always think long term kind of thing. So from a long term perspective, it wasn't right. But then, like you said, was it? There's an argument both sides. It
probably propelled you a little bit. It almost turns into like an agony aunt session, doesn't it? But it probably propelled you to Andy a bit quicker than maybe you would have. Had it not gone that way. And I guess that's
potentially,
how I look at things a little. Actually, would I have gone there without that? Probably not. I'd have probably done something. Knowing me, I'd have done something bloody random in some other direction. But
everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely.
I always believe that there's always a positive and a negative as well. Absolutely, kind of thing. But I just think that, in terms of sort of like going forward, when sort of like, because a lot of my focus at the moment is on the accounting practice, as we continue to grow and we get more stuff on board, naturally I'm going to be able to then focus more on the development side of stuff, which is what the plan will be. And at that time, you know, I'd certainly like to sort of, you know, still do stuff sort of locally as well, kind of thing. And yeah, sort of like that's when sort of like that relationship will, and with that I've got with Sean, etc., will sort of still continue
come back into its own again.
Continue to grow. You know, we should be in a different sort of place in terms of property at that point, and yeah, that's when we sort of work well together as well. So
amazing, love it. Well, that brings us to an end again for the second time. I've loved it. Loved listening to the amount of passion that comes out when you're talking about the accountancy. It's lovely to see, and like you, having that service business and property development business, it's lovely to have those two working together. So yeah, loved it. Thank you very much for coming on again.
Thank you. That's good.
To everyone who's listening and watching, thank you very much. Catch you on the next one.